Hey everyone, it's Finn here from the Magic Minds, and today we're going to be talking about the best lands for Commander. Yeah, so like I said, today we're going to be breaking down the best land cycles in Commander. I won't be talking about specific lands in this video, but the next video, part 2, I will be getting into like the specific and more utility lands that will go in your decks. Today I'm going to be covering the cycles, so like the common cycles of lands like shock lands, fetch lands, all those good stuff, and covering which ones I think are best. I'll be rating them on their efficiency, their strengths and weaknesses, and what decks they go in. And be giving you my top 3 best lands for Commander. Another note is that I won't be including the original duels because they're out of most people's price range. So yeah, I probably won't be including all those older lands that are really expensive. Also, if you like what you're seeing and you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss any new episodes. Alright, let's get right into the episode. Okay, so the first lands I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be talking about like a lot of the common lands, then I'll give you my top 3. So the first lands I'm going to be talking about is the battle lands. These ones are from Battle for Zendikar, I believe, and here I'll just read you an example. So Prairie Stream, it's the Azorius battle land. It's a land plains island, so it does have those basic land types, which is nice because it can be fetched up from fetch lands, which we'll talk about later. But it also enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands, and it taps for blue or white. So this is good, I'd say, in 2-color decks, because 3-color decks commonly are running a lot more non-basics, like triomes and other stuff like that, they don't count as basic lands, so with Prairie Stream, that's usually not going to enter untapped in those kind of decks, but with 2-color decks with a lot more basics, I definitely think these ones are very good because basic land types and can enter untapped pretty easily. So I think for more budget decks with a lot less non-basics, these are pretty cheap, and they're gonna enter untapped most of the time. Yeah, so I think they're really good in budget decks, budget 2-color mostly. So I really think that's where they fit in. Another thing to note is that they're pretty slow, I'd say, because you need to have 2 lands at minimum in order for them to enter untapped, and they also have to be basics. So I definitely stray away from these if you're looking for a more faster, competitive game with more non-basic lands and more like money spent on the mana base. Then I would not run these because they are not going to enter untapped like at all. So yeah, that's the battle lands. Next up, we're going to be talking about the check lands. All right, so the check lands are a cycle of lands that were printed in Ixalan, Dominaria, and like Innistrad. They've been reprinted a bunch, which is nice because they're sitting around like $4 or $5 each, which is kind of like the mid zone for these non-basic lands that have the possibility of entering untapped. So they're okay for budget. So I'll just read you an example. Glacial Fortress. It's a land. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a plains or island, and it taps for white or blue. No basic land type, so it can't be searched up, but we can ask for that on every land. But that does take away from their efficiency a little bit. But they do enter the battlefield untapped quite a bit, I think, because they don't really care about basic lands. They only care about plains or islands, so they'll trigger off shocks, they'll trigger off the battle lands, like we talked about last. And they tap for 2 colors, so I really like these lands. Especially if you have some in your collection, I definitely slot those into 2-color decks and probably 3-color decks because they enter the battlefield untapped most of the time, and they're just like a lot better than guild gates and stuff like that. So I think they're pretty good for what they are. Yeah, and obviously they have all the colors for them. The battle lands, they only had 5 2-colors combinations, but there's obviously 10 colors. Represented here on these cycle of 10 lands, so that's really good. Yeah, so I really like these lands. They're not like the fastest. You can't fetch them up, so if you're running fetches, maybe consider switching these out for something with basic land types, maybe triomes if you're 3-color, something like that, because they don't have the basic land types, but they are great if you want a pretty quick untapped land, and you're running a lot of other lands that either basics or they have the basic land types. So yeah, that's the check lands. Okay, so next up we have the triomes, which are the new three-color lands from Ikoria. So I'll read you an example. Zagoth Triome. It's a land, swamp, forest, island, and it taps for black, green, or blue. Um, and its battlefield tapped and has cycling for 3. So I really like these in 3-color decks because they're just definitely a step up from like just the tapped 3-color lands that we saw before in like Khans of Tarkir and stuff like that. Um, Actually, I don't think it was Khans, but it was one of those Tarkir block sets. So I like these a lot better than those because they have the basic land types, which is always great with like fetches or like Sky Shroud Claim or cards like that. And also they have cycling too, so that's great because it's never really a dead card. Like cycling 3 is a bit of a pain because it's 3 mana to draw 1 card. But I think that really just kind of helps their versatility a lot, and I just really like that piece of him because oftentimes drawing like tap lands late in the game is kind of a feel bad. So if you have a way to get these out, even if it's kind of slow, I think that's really important for these. So yeah, for as far as decks, kind of slower, like not as powerful 3-color decks, I definitely run these. Like CDH, I'm not sure these cut it because I don't think any tap lands will cut in CDH. But with like the majority of players, I think will want to run these over the other lands and maybe even with them for a multitude of lands that can tap for any colors of their deck. They're great because they're fetchable, so I really like these. And I'm glad they got printed in Ikoria, so they're pretty readily accessible. So yeah, I really like these. I think they're a great addition to the Magic's land base, I guess, Magic land library. So I just think they're a great addition to all the lands that we already have, and I think they're really good in 3-color decks for the most part. Alright, so next up we have the filter duels, or like the Shadowmoor or Eventide filters. So these ones actually just got reprinted in Double Master, so they're pretty cheap right now. I think normally they're sitting around like $10. So that's not quite good for a budget player, but they are pretty powerful, so let's just talk about them. So we'll look at an example, Graven Cairns. It's a land. It taps for colorless mana, or you can pay a hybrid Rakdos and tap it to add black, red, or red to your mana pool. So this is really good because they're really versatile, and they're really good for fixing your mana because they can take a mana of basically any color besides colorless in your deck. So if you're in a Rakdos deck, you can use black or red to activate them. So that kind of removes that problem of not being able to activate it if there's only one of those colors. And they can tap for both black and red, which is nice. It's kind of like a signet land. They can tap for black, which is good because a lot of decks maybe are like black heavy. So I definitely recommend those for like decks that are 2-color but maybe leaning into 1 color more than the other, and that can really help you like cast those hard cards to cast, like Crick, Son of Yawgmoth or something like that. If you have it in like a Graven deck, you can just use the black to cast it and save yourself some life or something like that with like a lot of black pips or a lot of red pips. It gives you a lot of versatility. Also, it taps for colorless, which doesn't matter that much, but like if you have like an Eldrazi Displacer, that's also sort of useful. So that's pretty nice. So yeah, I really like these. No basic land types, but that's okay. They filter really well. Like I said, great for fixing. They're pretty efficient. They enter untapped, which is nice. And also they can be used turn 1 because they can tap for color. So yeah, I really like these. I think they're a bit better than the Signet lands, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, definitely better than that. I think these are great lands for Commander. So definitely, they just got reprinted. I recommend you pick some of those up. I think they're gonna go back up in price a bit. And I think these are just great lands for Commander. So yeah, definitely go pick some of those up. Just got reprinted, and they're a lot cheaper right now. So yeah, those ones are great. Next up, we have the Signet lands. All right, so the Signet lands are pretty similar to the filter lands that we had before, but I'd say they're a little bit worse. Um, they're definitely a lot simpler because let's look at an example here. Sungrass Prairie. It's a land. You can pay one and tap it to add green white to your mana pool. Um, so it basically means it technically taps for two colors, but it only taps for one mana because you have to put one mana into it. So they're pretty good. Obviously, they can't be used turn one, but I really like these lands also because they're really cheap. Wizards seems to like reprinting them a lot, and you can get them for like some of them you can get for like $1. Some of them are a bit more expensive, but they're definitely a much cheaper version than the other ones. I think the other ones are that bit better because they can like tap for mana right away, and they can do better filtering. But still, I like these ones. You don't really need any color mana to begin with because you can pay a colorless to activate their ability. And I think they're a pretty like middle of the road land. They're pretty good in most decks. I'm not sure about 3-color, but 2-color, I think they're just great. So yeah, not too much to say about these, but I really like them. Definitely, if you have more money to spend, get the other ones, the filter lands. But these ones are just good too. So great land, and I think they're a bit underplayed. So yeah, and Wizards just keeps reprinting them. So I'm very happy about that. So these are usually pretty cheap. All right, so next up we have the Pain Lands. So the Pain Lands, I think, are really good. So I'll talk about these because they're one of my top 3 later, but they're really good because they can tap for colorless, or they can tap for one of 2 colors. If we look at our card, Right Wastes taps for colorless, or it taps for blue or white, and it deals 1 damage to you. So I'll talk about these later, how good they are in my top 3. But for now, let's move on to our shock lands. So shock lands, like the Pain Lands, they end the battlefield tapped unless you pay 2 life, and they have basic land types. So if we look at Hallowed Fountain, it's land, plains, island, and it enters the battlefield. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you pay 2 life. So these are great. They have the basic land types and all that stuff. This is also one of my top 3. So I'll talk about those, why they're so good later. Also the Battle Bond lands, another one of my top 3, but I'll talk about those later too. So our last one that's not part of the top 3 is fetch lands. Some of you may be surprised that these are not in the top 3, but they're definitely my 4th pick if I had to pick a 4th. I like these because, well, before I get into it, if you don't know what they are, we can look at example, Arid Mesa. It's a land you can tap to pay 1 life, sacrifice Arid Mesa, search your library for a mountain or a plains card, and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So these are really good because you can search your library for, obviously you can search for a basic mountain or plains, but it doesn't say basic on the card, so you can search for like any of the lands we just discussed with basic land types, shock lands, battle lands, triomes, all that good stuff. So they can really be very versatile like that. We're not going to be talking about them in the context of specific decks, but I definitely say they're one of the best lands for landfall decks, obviously, because they're good in general, and they can help you get extra landfall triggers, so that's great. They do cost 1 life, but the life in Commander doesn't really matter that much, so I think that's fine. These are really good. These definitely have, any way you put it, they're really good, and I think they could probably be top 3, but I just didn't put them on there for now, and if you feel differently, please comment below. Tell me why you think these ones are really good, or if you think another land that I missed should have been in the top 3. But yeah, these are really good. And also, another thing to notice is some people don't notice that they don't actually have any mana symbols on them, so they're treated as colorless. So you can put them in any deck, and then you can search. So even if you're in like a green-red deck, you can put Arid Mesa in there just to search for mountains. So you can search up your Stomping Ground or something like that. They can also be in a lot of decks. So yeah, they're just really great lands. It's no surprise to people who've been playing for a while. So yeah. Now, next up, we're on to our top 3. All right, so coming in at number 3 on our top 3 list is the Pain Lands. I really like these lands, and it's debatable that these could be worse than the fetches, but like I said, you can switch them around. Tell me in the comments if you think I made a mistake. Um, but I really love these lands because they're both like fast and really really versatile, but also they're budget because Wizards likes to reprint them. So if we look at like the most recent reprinted versions of them, they're only like 60, 70 cents. Um, and so that's just great for budget commander players because they can have their hands on a great land and it's on battlefield untapped. It can tap for colorless or it can tap for 1 of 2 mana and deal 1 damage to you. It's just great for budget players. They're fast. The damage, they can tap for 2 colors, and the damage doesn't really matter because you have 40 life in Commander, so that's great. And they can also tap for colorless, so if you only have to use them if you really have to. So yeah, I just love these lands. I think they're really good. They're a great budget option for a lot of players. And I think even more advanced players will run these because they're just great. I mean, the most expensive one is like $7 right now, which is the old Rakdos one. But yeah, I just really like these, and they don't have basic land types, but that's totally fine. Yeah, so I really like these, and that's why they're number 3 on the list. Alright, coming in at number 2 is the Shock Lands. So I already talked about what they were before, but if we look at Blood Crypt one more time, Swamp Mountain taps for black or red, and pay 2 life if you don't end the battlefield tapped. So yeah, this is they're just really great. The basic land types really help these out because they're a reliably untappable. Untappable, that's a new word. They enter the battlefield untapped pretty reliably, and they can also be fetched up. So that's like the common interaction with fetches is to find shocks. And they're just really great in any deck. They're not super budget. If I'm looking at Blood Crypt here, and it looks like it's about $14. So if you have some in your collection, by all means put them in your decks. But if you don't, maybe invest in a more budget land like the Pain Land, which is the one downside about these. But I still think that these are great. I'm not going to let budget kind of affect it too much. But yeah, so yeah, this is just great. The basic land types is kind of what really makes these on another level. So that's why they're number 2. All right, and finally, number 1. Is the Battle Bond land. So if you don't know what these are, they're like a less common one, and there's actually not a full cycle. They only have Selesnya, Rakdos, Dimir, Azorius, and Gruul ones. So we're yet to have the rest of the cycle, but these are really good lands for any deck because what to do, let's look at the Selesnya one, Bountiful Promenade. It's a land, and its battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents, and it taps for green or white. So, no basic land types, but this is basically an original dual land for commander players because more often than not we have at least three players in the game, which means 2 opponents, and most likely 4 or 5. So, this is like going to enter tapped pretty much all the time. So, this is just so good for commander, and these really should be played a lot more than they are. Prices, since they're so good for commander, they're about the same price as shocks, but yeah, they're just, man, I mean, there's no reason not to run these. They're just so good. Maybe you don't run shocks because you don't like the life loss or some weird thing like this, but these really no real downside. Yeah, so that's just why. There's not too much to explain. They're just the best land cycle for commander. Efficient, easy, awesome. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, so the next video I'm going to be doing is about some of the more, not the land cycles of like the regular kind of lands. I'm going to be talking more about like the best kind of utility lands and stuff like that. So make sure to stay tuned for that video. And yeah, so thank you for watching, and comment down below if you think I missed any good land cycles, or you thought you didn't disagree with my top 3. And yeah, thanks for watching. Keep magic on your mind.